Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever feel like your mind just totally goes blank sometimes, especially when you are trying to focus? This new study dives deep into that feeling. So what exactly is a blank mind? Researchers asked people to tell them when their mind went blank while they were doing a task. Mind blanking is supposed to be this state where you have absolutely no thoughts or no experience at all. You are not thinking about the task, and you are not thinking about anything else. Your mind is just gone. But here's where it gets interesting. These researchers wondered if people are actually experiencing blankness or if sometimes they just don't know what they were thinking about. Maybe when asked, "What were you just thinking?" and they can't remember, they just say, "My mind went blank," because that is the closest option. They wanted to see if this blanking report really meant no experience or maybe just unclear. Fuzzy thoughts. They did 4 studies to figure this out. In the first 3 studies, they had people do a task where they had to pay attention. Every so often, the task would stop, and they'd be asked what they were thinking about just before. The big twist was how they designed the questions. Some people got a list of choices that included mind blanking, but not "I don't know." Others got "I don't know," but not mind blanking. And the third group got both. The idea was to see if offering an "I don't know" option would make fewer people report mind blanking. If people were just saying blank because they couldn't remember, then giving them an "I don't know" choice should make them pick that instead, right? But here is the surprising part. What they found was that it didn't matter which options people had. The number of people who said their mind went blank stayed pretty much the same, and the number of people who said "I don't know" also stayed the same. This really suggests that people aren't just using mind blanking as a fancy way of saying "I don't know." They also looked at how sure people were about their reports and how long it took them to answer. People who reported mind blanking were just as sure and just as quick as people who reported other kinds of off-task thoughts, like daydreaming or worrying. If you are just guessing or unsure, you usually take longer and be less confident. This also points to people genuinely experiencing something that they're labeling as blank. Then came study 3, which was really clever. They wanted to understand what people meant by blank. So instead of just mind blanking, they gave participants 2 options: unclear or foggy thoughts or complete absence of experience. And guess what? People reported having unclear or foggy thoughts much more often than reporting a complete absence of experience. About 3% of the time people reported foggy thoughts, but only 1% of the time did they report a complete absence of feeling or thinking. This is a big clue. It suggests that when most people say their mind went blank, they probably don't mean a total void. They likely mean their thoughts were just fuzzy, unclear, or hard to pin down, but not completely gone. So, mind blanking might not be as terrifyingly empty as it sounds. This whole research journey shows us that mind blanking is a real thing people experience, and it is not just a cover for not remembering. It seems to be its own distinct state, often meaning thoughts are foggy rather than absent. When you think about it, trying to experience absolutely nothing, a true blank, is incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible for most of us. Our brains are constantly active. So it makes sense that what we label as mind blanking is more likely a state of low mental clarity or engagement rather than a complete shutdown. The researchers found that people were confident and quick in reporting mind blanking. This suggests it's a state they recognize and can report without much hesitation. They're not struggling to recall what happened. They know they experienced something they're calling blank. The fact that they tried different ways of asking the question and the results stayed consistent really builds confidence that they're measuring something real. It is not just an artifact of how they asked. However, some earlier studies had hinted that maybe people weren't so sure when they reported mind blanking. This new research aimed to address those uncertainties by making the experimental setup clearer. The main goal here was to clarify what is going on during mind blanking. Are we truly experiencing nothing, or is it something else? The studies aim to show that mind blanking isn't simply a placeholder for "I don't know" or a confused state. In studies 1A and 1B, they used a sustained attention task. Think of it like a really simple game where you have to press a button for certain things and not press it for others. They kept track of how often people got distracted. The SART, the task they used, is pretty standard for checking attention. It is designed to be a bit boring, which, as the researchers point out, can sometimes make people's minds wander more. By messing with the response options, they showed that people weren't just picking mind blanking because they felt unsure. They were genuinely reporting an experience that felt different from just not knowing. The findings at mind blanking rates didn't change much regardless of whether "I don't know" was an option is a key takeaway. It means that the phenomenon itself seems to be distinct enough for people to recognize and report, separate from simply not knowing. The high confidence ratings for mind blanking reports are really important. It counters the idea that people are hesitant or uncertain about this experience. They feel as sure about their mind going blank as they do about daydreaming. And the fact that they responded quickly, just like with other thought reports, is another piece of evidence. If it took them a long time to decide, it might suggest they were searching for something to report or struggling to categorize it. But they weren't. They also looked at how performance on the attention task related to mind blanking. The results here were a bit mixed, suggesting that mind blanking might not always have a huge impact on performance, especially if it happens infrequently. Most people in the study felt that the idea of mind blanking made sense and that they'd experienced it. This shows it is a relatable phenomenon. Only a small number were skeptical, which is interesting. Study 2 aimed to make the task even less demanding to encourage more mind-wandering, hoping to see clearer differences related to the "I don't know" option. But again, the mind-blanking rates and the effect of the "I don't know" option remain mostly unchanged. They used a slightly different version of the attention task in Study 2, a so-called vigilance task. This is where you mostly wait and only react to rare targets. It is designed to be less engaging. When they combined data from Studies 1 and 2, the overall conclusion held strong. The availability of an "I don't know" option did not significantly impact how often people reported mind blanking. Study 3 really drilled down into the feeling of mind blanking by splitting it into unclear or foggy thoughts versus complete absence of experience. They got a clearer picture. The key finding here is that foggy thoughts were reported much more often than a complete absence of experience. This strongly suggests that mind blanking often means a diffuse, unclear mental state, not an empty one. Confidence in reporting these clearer distinctions, foggy versus absent, was generally high, similar to reports of other off-task thoughts. This reinforces that these experiences are recognizable and reportable. The unclear or foggy category appears to capture what most people mean when they report mind blanking. It is that feeling of your mind being a bit hazy, not focused, but still having some kind of awareness. The absent category, representing a true lack of experience, was reported very rarely. While it might happen, it is not the typical experience associated with the term mind blanking in these studies. Again, performance on the attention task didn't clearly link to these specific types of mind blanking, likely because the experiences themselves, especially the absent ones, were so infrequent. So, what is the big story here, mind blanking? As reported in these studies, doesn't seem to be a sign of uncertainty or a failure of memory. People are confident and quick when they report it. The most crucial finding is that offering an "I don't know" option didn't reduce mind blanking reports. This is pretty strong evidence that people are reporting an actual experience. High confidence and quick responses mean they recognize the state it is happening. It is not something they're struggling to define. The fact that they didn't just pick "I don't know" when mind blanking wasn't an option tells us that these are likely different phenomena. The distinction made in Study 3 is really important for future research. Researchers need to be clearer about what mind blanking means. Is it fog or void, and how do we measure it accurately? The takeaway is that mind blanking is likely often about experiencing foggy or unclear thoughts rather than a complete absence of them. So, when you feel like your mind has gone blank, it might just be a bit fuzzy, and that is a normal reportable experience. Of course, these studies were done online with prolific participants. We don't know if people in a lab setting or from different cultures would report mind blanking differently. More research is always needed. The idea of just doing, where you are performing an action on autopilot without much conscious thought, is another interesting avenue. It might be related to mind blanking, or it might be something different altogether, and more research can explore that. The fixed response options are a limitation. Future studies might benefit from more open-ended questions to truly capture the nuances of these internal states. So, the next time you feel your mind going blank, remember these studies. It is likely your thoughts are just getting a little foggy, and that is a normal part of how our minds work. What do you think? Share your experiences with mind blanking in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science insights. Thanks for watching.